Hey, you're gonna have to leave. You're gonna distract me way too much.
Why did you start your video like this meme? Like, why'd you do that?
The PS5 and Xbox Series have been really, really awesome ever since their launch.
Nothing like a massive generalization to get us started. I mean, the new consoles have been alright, definitely a step up from the last generation and how they launched, but they're still nowhere near good enough, in my opinion at least, to justify buying over a PC.
If you just look here, it doesn't take a genius. These consoles are selling very, very well.
Because sales equal quality, don't you know?
It starts to bring some fear into the PC gaming market. Are these consoles just better than computers?
Bro, no PC gamer is scared. What are you on? The consoles are striking fear into the gaming market. Like, yeah, bro, I'm super scared of paying hundreds of dollars for 30 FPS. I'm just fucking stricken with fear at paying to play my own games online. Options are spooky. I need Daddy Sony to tell me what to do.
And is PC gaming going to die because of it?
First, they're going to use the consoles kind of in a rudimentary way, basically just cranking up settings of last-gen games, but they really can move data, like, fundamentally more efficiently than the PC.
Whoa. Fundamentally more efficient? That's literally wrong. If this is where you're getting your information from, it's not surprising that you're this delusional when it comes to consoles and PCs. By the way, the title of this video is, Are Consoles the Only Future for Gaming?
All right, here we go.
There is literally nothing about a console that makes it fundamentally faster or more efficient than a PC. When you get down to it, consoles are just streamlined PCs, but there's literally nothing about the hardware that cannot be present on a PC, and there's certainly nothing about the software that can't be present on a PC, and quite honestly, there's nothing about the software or the hardware on a console that makes it more effective or efficient. You know, when you get down to the raw timing and the raw performance standards and the performance capabilities. In fact, that's one of the reasons why the PC is so much better for gaming. There's no artificial bottlenecks or restrictions on what can be done. The only way that I can see this guy's statement of the console being fundamentally more efficient, like, the only way I can see that making sense is in the fact that the consoles do less than the PC. Like, they're literally doing less than a PC is. But even still, that's not a fundamental speed factor, because everyone knows that despite the PC doing more and running more processes at any given time, it's still more than capable of doing just about everything faster than a console does, because PCs are better than ever at handling those kinds of things today. It's the reason why if you open up Task Manager at any given time, your PC will be running dozens and dozens of background processes, and yet only using like 1 or 2% of your memory. So really, when you get down to it, the only thing that could make the console possibly, fundamentally more efficient than the PC is actually a restriction of the platform for the consumer. And if you think that's a flex, then fucking yikes, this video will be fun.
Well, it's really important to take note about everything that makes up these consoles and the reason why they are very good value to basically the average person, the average gamer, to be a little bit more specific.
Wait, why'd you correct yourself there? Like, what was the point of that?
Specs on the PS5, for example, you get a CPU that is an 8-core Zen 2 CPU, and then you get a GPU, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of like a 5700 XT from AMD to like a 6700 XT.
A GPU that came out in 2019, by the way. Meaning that by the time the console came out, the graphics tech was already about a year off from being cutting edge. Which could be why it's already dropping performance standards down to 30 frames per second, but I have a feeling you're not really going to talk about that in this video.
And then you get 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 RAM, which is very fast RAM. And that RAM is shared between the CPU and the GPU because this is an APU that we're working with here.
The PC has faster memory options. And that distinction you make there is actually really important. The memory in the PS5 is shared between the GPU and CPU, whereas the GPU on a PC will have dedicated memory in addition to the system memory. And of course, this is all glossing over the fact that you have tons of options on the PC as to what memory you want to use, how much of it you want to get. Like, memory on the console is better than it's been in the past, for sure, but it is never going to outdo the memory options at your disposal on the PC. You want to talk about fundamental differences between the machines, there's one right there. To make an analogy, the fundamental differences between a console and the PC in terms of load times and the moving of data, it's like if you were on a racetrack and you had a sports car and a teleporter, and you said to the two operators, I want you to get from point A to point B as fast as possible. So like, yeah, the sports car is fundamentally better at doing this and fundamentally being on a racetrack, but the dude with the teleporter is not going to give a shit because he's already at the finish line.
And it is all wrapped up into this really nice package that we call the PS5, otherwise known as the Wi-Fi router. Here's this guy, the fridge. I mean, AMD designed both of these systems, and they have a very similar CPU in them. The GPU in it is supposed to be a little bit faster, probably because it also clocks faster. GDR6, 16 gigabytes, but it's on a 320-bit bus. It's probably the same on the PS5.
Yeah, it's probably the same. If only there were a way for you to find out.
But that is a pretty big bus for memory, all things considered. Memory bandwidth of about 560 gigabytes per second on 10 gigabytes of it, on 6 gigabytes of it at 336 gigabytes per second.
He's making a lot of big words right now. Like, just stick with it. Like, he clearly doesn't know what he's talking about, so he's just rushing through all the big words, and soon we'll be able to get into his actual arguments. Stick with it.
So the 6 gigabytes are probably for the CPU end, and then the 10 gigabytes are probably for the VRAM, I would think.
You keep saying probably. Like, you don't actually know what these values are for, which is fine. You don't have to know what they're for, but you probably shouldn't have made it a talking point in your video if you don't understand them. Like, you're basically just being a more well-spoken version of Crap Gamer at this point. It's not a good look. Throwing out a bunch of numbers and big words that you admit to not even knowing the significance of, like, ooh.
All wrapped up in the package of $500. Pretty good deal. I mean, finding a $500 gaming PC with those specs is just pretty much not possible.
Maybe at the time that you made this video that was true, but right now I would argue it really isn't. I mean, you made this video a month ago, so yikes, but anyways, you equated the power of these consoles to the RX 57 XT, which you can get for roughly $150 to $250 right now on Newegg. If you're trying to build an equivalent PC to the modern consoles for $500 or less, I would argue that's more than doable if we're starting at the $150 to $200 mark for a GPU, since that's typically the most expensive part of the build. You might go over the $500 mark by the time it's all said and done, by a little bit, but if you want to get generous and consider things like game prices and the lack of subscriptions on the PC, it's way cheaper, you know what I mean? Like, if you just compare the price of a console to the price of an equivalent PC, yeah, you'll save $100 or so on the console usually, but if you want to compare the price of the machine plus a few games and any mandatory subscriptions for online play, you're actually saving money right out of the gate on PC. And as time goes on, the amount of money saved is just going to keep going up. And that's not even getting into how much better games actually play on that console equivalent PC versus the console, because PC games actually have graphic settings and whatnot for fine-tuning the performance. Whereas the console is just going to run games however it wants to run them, regardless of how well or not well it's taking advantage of the hardware. Too Long didn't read, it's debatable that a console equivalent PC is actually going to cost more than a console in the current market, but that arguably doesn't even matter, because ultimately the PC is the cheaper choice once you start buying games and maintaining the system.
It's up a PC here on PC Part Picker that would be a similar processing power to these consoles. That total is coming out to $942 plus the cost of that cooler, so about $980, and then getting, I don't know, you could get a Windows key on another website for like $25.
Okay, let's take a look at this console equivalent PC you made.
Well, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I spotted several big mistakes.
First of all, you put a 6700 XT in here instead of the 5700 XT that you mentioned earlier. And I know earlier in the video he said the PS5's GPU was somewhere between those two cards, but in reality, the 5700 XT is the more accurate of the two. And obviously it's hard to make a one-to-one comparison between PC and console in terms of GPUs here, because the console will be shooting for hard performance caps, whereas the PC is more free and open with how you want your games to run. But generally speaking, if we're talking about the most common performance targets and equivalent graphical settings, the 5700 XT is probably the closest GPU equivalent to a PS5. So putting a $350 6700 XT in this build reeks of either dishonesty or ignorance. Especially since you can get a 6700 XT for less than $350, which I guess can be chalked up to this video being a month old, but with how ignorant you seem to be, I'm just kind of expecting the worst. Moving on to the rest of this build, you have almost $200 going towards a Ryzen 7 5700X, which is way overkill for a console equivalent build. Again, it's hard to draw exact equivalents between the console and PC here because the console is obviously running its own operating system and their CPUs aren't usually doing a whole lot in the background, but the general consensus I'm finding online is that the PS5 CPU is somewhere between a Ryzen 5 PS5 5600 and a Ryzen 7 3700. In fact, the CPU in the PS5 is based on the latter, but it's debatable if the PS5's version can hit the same caps as the PC's version in practice. But the point is, no matter how you want to look at this, there is no shot you need an R7 5700X to match the console's performance in-game or otherwise. And in case it wasn't clear by now, you don't have to buy all new parts if you're buying a PC. The used part marketplace on PC is amazing, because there are so many parts coming out all the time and so many parts for people to pick from that there is a giant secondhand part marketplace of people just selling parts that are in great condition, but they just replaced with something newer. In this direct comparison in this video, I'm using the brand new prices to compare because I think what he's trying to do is a direct, new console to new PC thing here. But just know that if you're a first-time PC builder, there's absolutely nothing wrong with buying secondhand parts. In fact, I encourage it. Because also, the more people buying used parts and not buying brand new stuff at market price means the lower the market price will be driven for upcoming parts. The free market at work, it's a beautiful thing. But anyways, back to this PC you made. The CPU and GPU are both wrong, but what about the rest of it? Well, for starters, you have a CPU cooler that's not even available, so I can tell how much thought and effort you put into this. You picked a 750 watt power supply for $100, which literally just searching 750 watt power supply in Newegg gave me cheaper results. You also picked a $90 case, which, fair enough, but also if the goal was to make this PC for as cheap as possible, it's really easy to find a decent case in the $50 to $70 range. Basically, what I'm getting at here is this build that you made for a console equivalent PC has several $100s of either incorrect or unnecessary costs. Also, if you're in the market for a gaming PC, I would never recommend intentionally trying to match the console's performance or specs, because, what's the point? You can do so much better for really not that much more money. Which is a different topic, I know, but it's relevant to the overall point. At least, I think it is. I don't know. I've been rambling for a while now, so I've kind of lost the plot. Let's just keep going with the video.
I mean, you're looking at about $1,010 for this system, just to match the performance of a PS5 or an Xbox Series. So about double the price in total.
No, you're a doofus.
But the dollar value being half the price or even less than half the price of an equivalent PC on the consoles isn't the only compelling feature that they have.
I mean, that's arguably not even a feature they have, so you better get explaining.
Because consoles have some things inherently that are just better than PC. One of those things is that GDDR6 memory that I mentioned earlier.
GDDR6 memory has been in PC graphics cards since 2018. So no, try again.
It's unified memory for this APU. And that means that you have really low latency and it's soldered to the board. So also keep that in mind, which just makes things very, very snappy.
Bro, you legit have no clue what you're talking about. You just Googled the specs of the PS5 and were like, oh, those are some big words and fancy abbreviations I don't understand. They must be important. And Sony said they are important, so they must be. And you just said the shit is soldered to the motherboard too, which, believe it or not, is not a good thing. Once again, you want to talk about fundamental differences between consoles and PCs? How about the fact that PCs have interchangeable parts that allow you to customize your build, while the consoles have shit soldered to the motherboard so you couldn't change it even if you wanted to? But the main takeaway here is that you're bragging about GDDR6 memory as if it's some console exclusive feature when it's literally been on the PC for 5 years now. Congratulations, the console's finally caught up.
And Moore's Law is Dead did an awesome conversation with a game developer.
The consoles know that they have a certain speed SSD, a certain amount of RAM, so they can stream it in and out as needed.
Yeah.
It knows what it's using. The shaders are pre-compiled.
Compared to a PC, which could have millions of combinations that you can't really account for them all.
And yet, the technically superior versions of multi-platform games are always, 100% of the time, released on PC. Just because there are various differences in hardware doesn't mean the game literally has to be optimized every million different ways. I know you've already failed at Googling things, so I don't want to throw things like DirectX at you because you'd probably just think it was a Marvel character or something, but to dumb it down, the PC has a whole bunch of different options for each of the components, but the basic makeup of those components will always be the same. Every PC, at least, most every gaming PC, will have a video card, a CPU, a motherboard, some RAM, and a storage unit. And yes, there are various options for each of those components, but the makeup of each machine is more or less the same, or at the very, very most, similar. And there are plenty of ways to make sure your software is prepared for that variation of parts, DirectX being one of them. But this is also glossing over the biggest red flag with your logic here. You realize that every game ever made was developed on a PC. They were built and programmed on a PC and then made compatible with the consoles. So yes, a developer will know exactly what they're working with when they make a game for a certain console, and that's a certainty that they just don't have when developing the PC version, but that doesn't mean that they just hit a roadblock and stop. I'll never understand why people like you keep coming back to the whole, oh, there's a million different variations of PC hardware argument, when PC games are doing just fine. You know, obviously give or take the handful of shitty ports that come out every year, but there's shitty console ports every year too, so who cares? That's not a mark against the platform as a whole. Almost every PC game that comes out is optimized perfectly acceptably for just about any combination of hardware. And whenever a shitty port does come out, it's always because of bad programming, and not because of the simple fact that it was built for the PC as a platform. If developing games for PC really did force developers to take every possible combination of hardware into account, they would either stop developing for PC, or there would be way more rampant issues with developing for PC. The world that you're describing does not line up with the world we're living in.
It can be very hard on game developers to try to optimize things for everybody, especially when the latest tech is pushing features to the extreme, especially with VRAM.
Bro, if developers are having issues optimizing anything, it's console versions. Literally every console generation comes out with a whole slew of problems that developers speak out about, and we're already seeing that. The Switch version of Hogwarts Legacy still hasn't come out. It's not supposed to come out till November. And how many AAA games have been just capping out at 30 frames per second this generation on the most cutting-edge console hardware? Like, imagine trying to make a cutting-edge game right now and having to work with consoles with 2019 hardware. But oh, it's fine because they sure can read things fast. Like, PC gaming has its issues for sure, but this really isn't the angle you want to be taking with this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like with everything, a trade-off. And even for me, trying to stay below the 8 GB target, we have to do so much work to make it happen.
Okay, I have no clue who this guy is that you keep cutting to, but I just have a gut feeling that you're taking him way out of context. Like, you were just talking about the PC having millions of combinations, but then you cut to a guy talking about an 8 GB target? Like, again, it's hard to figure out what exactly they're supposed to be saying because you're just taking them out of context, and I'm not about to watch the, 2-hour podcast that those clips are from. But with everything you've gotten wrong already, I just have a gut feeling you're severely misunderstanding what they're saying.
Those really cool advantages that is starting to surface on consoles is direct storage. And that is taking all the data from the SSD, instead of loading it to system memory, having the CPU having to funnel it to your graphics card. The graphics card just gets those things sent directly to its memory, and then it can feed off of the textures and everything that are in it. That direct storage will decrease loading times and possibly decrease the amount of memory that needs to be used.
See, this is what I'm talking about. Direct storage is not a feature exclusive to consoles, not even close. It's on the PC as well. And also, for the so-called evidence of direct storage being super cool and awesome for console gaming, you showed footage of Forspoken, a game that ran like complete ass. And also, ironically, if you Google direct storage games, literally every top result is about the feature on PC, not console. Look, you can argue that Sony is making good use of the concept of direct storage, and I can agree with that to some extent. But if the end goal is faster load times, the PC is already capable of faster load times than either the PS5 or the Series X. And that's the reason this video is so frustrating to listen to. You can throw out as many fancy terms and pseudo-technical knowledge as you want, but your end goals completely invalidate everything that you say, because at the end of the day, they're not an advantage. You say the PS5 has direct storage, and it's super awesome because of direct storage, and the end result of that super awesomeness is that the load times are super fast. But I can completely invalidate everything you say by just being like, okay, well, PC load times are faster, and also we have direct storage too. So what was the point of any of this?
Everything is standard, and they can move data so much faster, which makes things like direct storage be way more easily enabled on consoles compared to PC, which we're seeing a very, very slow rollout, and the only game that we've only really seen it in is Forspoken, and I don't think it made that much of a difference.
Okay, so is this a PS5 exclusive feature or not? Because it's sounding to me like this isn't a PS5 exclusive feature, so it's kind of weird that you brought it up. And frankly, I don't care if it's a slow rollout, because going back to what I said before, the PC has faster load times without it, and we're getting it rolled out, so truly, what is the point of this? And again, there's nothing fundamental about the consoles that makes them faster than the PC. Stop saying that. You obviously don't know what the fundamental difference is, which is why you've been talking for over 4 minutes now and still haven't said anything fundamentally faster about the consoles. You've just declared them to be fundamentally faster. Which, again, when you get down to the end result of game performance and consumer experience, that's not true.
And the guy told me, from what I'm seeing, direct storage, if you're doing what the PS5 can do, which is stream in assets while you're playing, storage means you have to use the graphics card. So they're seeing a 20% hit in performance when you're streaming and rendering the game. And then there will be stuttering with the 20% lower performance. So if you want to remove stuttering, you might need to go to 30 or 40% performance hit because, well, it's doing the work of a graphics card and an entire IO system. Like, that may just be a thing on PC where they're like, you might need double the teraflops to make up for the fact that you don't have these IO controllers or something.
While nothing he just said is technically false, I'm going to keep going back to the point that I made like 2 or 3 times already, which is the fact that the PC has options where the console does not. Even without direct storage, the PC is capable of faster load times than the PS5. And the PC is going to keep improving its direct storage capabilities, whereas the PS5 likely is not going to get much better. Because not only is the hardware locked, but there's also less incentive to make it better, because the console isn't as technically driven as the PC.
That is one of the reasons why you see the sales numbers on consoles, and you see the standardized hardware, and it's obvious why developers focus their games on consoles first.
If developers focus their games on consoles first, why are we seeing more and more games skip certain consoles? Like, the Switch has frankly been left behind for years now by a lot of multi-platform publishers. And also, if what you just said is actually the case, why does every multi-platform game come to the PC? And the PC has more users than the consoles by a fucking landslide. You keep drawing the wrong conclusions from technically correct information, and it's really annoying. I'm on the verge of just bailing on this one because you just keep taking things out of context and using it to make more giant sweeping generalizations. It's so clear you don't know what you're talking about. You thought of a juicy title and then you worked backwards from there. It's really obvious.
We've seen in recent releases on PC, they've kind of been an unoptimized mess, especially with VRAM usage.
And that's because of lazy development and no other reason. I know what you're about to do. You're about to take a really badly programmed PC game and use it to justify everything you've said about the platform as a whole, while completely ignoring all the excellently programmed games on the PC that have come out this year alone. I haven't watched this far in the video yet, but I already know that's what you're about to do.
But on consoles, even though they only have 16 gigs of RAM total in their system, that factor may seem limiting, but it doesn't seem to be as important as it does on PC.
He says as he shows footage from the RE4 remake, which runs like a fucking dream on PC.
PC, you end up storing a whole lot of extra data because you're not sure how things are going to perform.
If we really want to do what the PS5's doing,
Bro, if you cut to that goddamn podcast one more time, no, you know what? I'm done. You've made your thesis very clear and you're not going to change your mind. If you had a solid point to make, you would have made it by now. But instead, you made a bunch of wrong ones, and I got exactly 5 minutes and 26 seconds into this video, and I just can't do it anymore. You're just talking in circles. Consoles are absolutely not the future of gaming, and I would give my recap here, but I feel like if you're still watching the video at this point, you know what I'm gonna say. Bro, you really gotta work on your research skills or your presentation skills or something, because with the information that you presented here, there is no way you could legitimately come to the conclusion that you did without confirmation bias. And it's fucking exhausting to listen to. Toodles.